Well, various issues related to all of that. Joining me now is Dr. Amar Latif, who's an independent councillor in Oxford. He resigned from the Labour Party over the Labour leader's stance on Gaza a couple of weeks ago, and he joins us right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. You resigned long before this vote on the ceasefire last night. You resigned because you felt, we understand, that the policy that the Labour leader was pursuing, not calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, didn't represent your views. Have you changed your views at all since then?
No, I didn't think so. So I actually resigned much earlier than that. I resigned when Keir Starmer was asked on an LBC interview whether he agreed a siege was appropriate, to which he answered yes. He took, unfortunately, 9 days to come out with a clarifying statement to say he was answering a different question. And in the meantime, his shadow front bench were having national interviews on TV suggesting that actually they would support a siege on Gaza in certain circumstances, and I couldn't, in good conscience, belong to a party that had such, where the national leadership had such disregard for human life and international law. So that was the reason I resigned initially, I did have an early call for a ceasefire. I think the call for a humanitarian pause is very misguided, actually, it's very disappointing that the Labour leadership, although they have significantly changed their stance on this, haven't come out to call for a ceasefire and didn't back the SNP amendment yesterday evening.
Well, OK, the thing is, I mean, far be it from me to be defending Keir Starmer. He claims in that interview that he was being asked question, he was answering, and he claims that he wasn't saying he was in favour of, a siege and people in Gaza not having access to food and water and medicine, but actually he was talking about Israel's right to self-defence. Yes, he supports Israel's right to self-defence. That is a stance he is sticking to. Now, whether or not, I don't know what was in his heart. The interview can be heard by anybody. When we have these votes in the House of Commons, SNP put the vote forward. Labour basically wanted their MPs not to back it. 56 defied Keir Starmer, 10 on the front bench. You either had to resign or basically have considered to have resigned from the front bench. What do you think that achieves? Because it's fabulous for people to demonstrate their wonderful virtue. Hello, look at me. I'm in favour of peace. I don't want babies to die. I'm a nice person. Look what I've done. I mean, that's lovely and great, but I'm not sure what it achieves.
Yes, I would just say on his statement, it took him 9 days to come out and say that he was answering a different question while his shadow front bench were making different statements to the contrary.
Fair, that's not abnormal for Keir Starmer. He doesn't normally respond to things very quickly, does he? But yeah, OK,
sure,
it's a fair point to make.
We may well agree on that, Julia.
Talk about the vote last night.
Coming back to your... Yeah, coming back to your question, I mean, I think that then calls into question, well, what's the purpose of calling for a humanitarian pause as well? That same question would be put to that. And I think actually, if you look at the international players on this, actually the UK, the US and the EU are slight outliers on this. What we're seeing is that actually the majority of countries out there, over 2/3 of the UN General Assembly voted for a ceasefire. We have had a Security Council resolution yesterday evening on this, which is the first UN Security Council resolution which has passed on Israel and Palestine since 2016. So we are seeing there's a significant change in position that's being taken, and it's unfortunate that the national leadership in this country is not taking that. I think we need to be honest, though, with what it achieves is it does put pressure on the Israelis to say, yes, you have a right to defend yourself.
Opposition MPs in the British Parliament voting for a ceasefire, you think that puts pressure on the Israeli government?
Well, I think it does put some pressure on, but had the SNP amendment passed, that certainly would have put pressure on the Israeli government.
You think the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary of a country where 1,400 people were brutally tortured, raped, their bodies mutilated, burnt, murdered, 240 of their fellow citizens still being held captive by a terrorist organisation, you think they're going, oh, well, in that case, the SNP and Labour and maybe some Tories and Lib Dems have voted for us to have a ceasefire. Oh, sorry, we've got it completely wrong. Absolutely, we're listening to you. Come on, give me a... Jess Phillips is right and our people are completely wrong. Really, you think that's what they'll think?
So I would just return to the events of October 7th to agree with you that the atrocities we saw were unacceptable and should be condemned, and I do condemn them. What we need to be clear on, though, is that when any country follows a response to that, it has to be within international law. And what we must remember is that most of the international laws, Geneva Convention and so forth, most of them came about after World War II, when significant atrocities similar to what happened on October the 7th happened. And what it was the world coming together to say, actually, we must not let this happen again. So yes, those atrocities were unacceptable. Unfortunately, though, what we're seeing with collective punishment, with the breaking of significant international law from the Israeli government,
well, that will be up for debate, I think, in the future.
And we do need to be able to call that out when we can.
You say we don't want a repeat of what Hamas did. Hamas leadership has said, we want to do it again. We would do it on October the 8th, October the 9th. We will do it every single day until we see the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. They've been very clear. Unless Hamas is no longer in existence, it will happen again. In which case, what does a ceasefire achieve? Because it's very clear to me, we would all like not a single extra person, certainly an innocent child, to be killed. Anyone who doesn't think that, frankly, is a monster. However, what if we say Israel has a right to self-defense? And yes, we can go back over the last, 15 years, 75 years, 2,000 years if you want. But at the end of the day, Israel is a recognised national state. They have a right to protect their borders from an attack from a terrorist organisation just over the border. They have a right to self-defense. If you believe they do have a right to self-defense, as any nation state does, what does that actually involve if it doesn't involve the destruction of a terrorist entity that has vowed to massacre their people?
So we must be clear that Hamas are not the Palestinian people in their entirety, and the Palestinian people are not Hamas. I'm obviously not a spokesman for Hamas. That's not why I'm here. So what we need to be clear on is that any response does need to be within international law. And you've got all the international government organizations saying that actually what they're doing goes beyond international law and is in contravention of that. The other thing that I think we need to be really clear on is actually what a humanitarian pause might achieve and what it actually what problems it might cause. So any cessation of hostilities should be welcome. The problem with the humanitarian pause is that it suggests that actually people are only dying through a passive process of not getting food and water. And whilst it's true that many people are dying because of that, many other people are dying because there are bombs that are falling on them. And so actually,
but the bombs are falling on them because Hamas is a terrorist organisation which is in control of Gaza. It actually has an awful lot of support among the Palestinian people of Gaza, unfortunately, due to the propaganda they play out in their schools and the control they have. They are stopping people leaving Gaza City and northern Gaza to travel safely to South Gaza. They have been attacking people on the roads that's supposed to be the safe route. They have been putting their military commands in tunnel entrances underneath civilian buildings like hospitals, schools and refugee camps. They have brought this on the Palestinian people.
Well, international law would tend to disagree with you. And I think the important thing to say is that if we think that the events of October the 7th allow any sort of response. We've already had the awful situation where 11,000 innocent Palestinians have died.
We don't know they're innocent.
5,000 children
we don't. No, I'm sorry,
children.
We don't know they're all innocent, Amar. We don't know that.
Okay, well, put a figure on it. What figure do you think are innocent?
I don't
20%,
know.
30%?
You don't know. We don't even know for sure what the figure is because it's a figure put out by a terrorist organisation. Definitely thousands of people have died. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy when children are killed. It's a tragedy when civilians are killed. You don't know.
So there will be lots of children that are dying.
There will. There are. We understand 4,000. You don't know they're all innocent people.
Then is what is the number that you're willing to accept?
What is the number I'm willing to accept?
Civilians and innocent children that you're willing to accept for
what is the number of Israeli Jews you're willing to accept to be slaughtered?
Well, so I didn't quite hear your question because I was trying to respond to your previous one. So what I was trying to say was that actually when people are only calling for humanitarian pause, the question that needs to put to them is, what is the number of innocent children and civilians that you're willing to accept? The other more problematic problem with calling for calling for anything less than a ceasefire is a ceasefire. What we should really want for every civilian and innocent person in that area is hope and peace and justice for the future,
Well,
and
that's
that's for
lovely.
every
Let's all
Israeli citizen
sorry,
and
Amar.
every
Let's all
innocent
think
Palestinian civilian
kumbaya.
as well.
The people of Gaza live under a terrorist regime which doesn't want a peaceful solution, doesn't want to negotiate, doesn't want a two-state solution. It wants to annihilate its Israeli and Jewish neighbour. There isn't anything to negotiate there. They've taken 240 people, including grandmothers and babies, hostage. I mean, if people in Gaza are really, you know, absolutely, those people will be wanting an end to the hostilities. The aim, what everyone should be doing, is calling for Gaza, so for Hamas to hand back the hostages and for Hamas to step down and walk away from their violent and divisive aims. But no, the pressure is all on Israel. Israel didn't start bombing Gaza out of the blue.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite true. I think there is significant pressure on Hamas, and you're seeing that with actually the Qataris, who are their main international backers. And as you mentioned, the hostages,
dictator state of Qatar.
The taking of hostages is, of course, against international law, and we should all request and demand that they're also released.
I don't see that on the marches. I don't hear that. Look at all this footage, these marches.
Well,
I'd like to see every placard saying, free the hostages. But no, stop bombing the people.
I think there is. I don't see many people saying those hostages should remain. So certainly my position, which is what I'm here to represent, is those hostages should be released. As you're talking about a two-state solution, that is absolutely the future. We must also remember, though, that the Israeli government has never committed to a two-state solution.
Yes, they have. When the UN offered a two-state solution, they accepted it.
In Gaza as animals, and that sort of inhumane language and rhetoric is not what's going to bring about an everlasting peace.
Because Hamas in no way think of the Jewish people like that. Dr. Amar Latif, I really appreciate you joining us. Lots of agree and disagree on that. He's an independent councillor in Oxford. Philip